everyone, welcome back to Manufacturing Hub. If you guys are watching live on this Wednesday afternoon, if you're not watching live, probably not on this Wednesday afternoon, welcome back. Vlad and I are super excited to go bring Tom back on. We'll go introduce him in just a minute. Go continue the conversation around AI in manufacturing. Vlad, I don't remember who I was talking to within the last week. And we were talking about AI, and I told them it's at some point, Vlad and I had pondered at the end of 2024, the beginning of 2025, can we go put like an entire theme, like 4 episodes together of AI in manufacturing? And we're like, honestly, I don't know if we can. And now looking at it, I'm not sure we've gone a month without bringing up some sort of AI topic in manufacturing. Which just very much goes towards the speed in which we're moving in the industrial side, and honestly all across the AI side, be it from LLMs to specific tools and solutions and beyond. So we're happy to go bring Tom back on in order to talk about some of those solutions in manufacturing. As a note for our listeners, Tom's previous episode was 179. That was live at the Sepasoft headquarters at ICC, or at the last day of ICC 2024, in which we did a very early deep dive into Sepa IQ, which was a lot of fun. I remember it was a lot of fun. I don't remember if I had any voice at all during the conversation. I do remember thinking to myself, wow, we've just spent 3 days talking, and hopefully there's enough voice in order to in order to go have that live. And it was a lot of fun. I think we're going to get some updates on how Sepa IQ is doing. Do want to note for all of our listeners, I think we're 4 weeks away from ICC. So if you guys are going to be in Sacramento with Vlad, myself, with Tom, the Sepasoft, the Inductive folks, anyone else, please let us know. We will go say hi and figure out some of those other fun things. If you guys are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you guys are new, every week, Vlad and I have fun conversations with other practitioners in the industry. This week, we're talking all about AI solutions in manufacturing. So without further ado, we want to officially welcome Tom back onto the show. Tom, thank you so much for coming back and being here.
Oh, thank you guys too. I really love what you're doing for the industry and love watching your podcast.
No, really appreciate your time, Tom. If I can ask you, before we dive into the conversation on AI, could you please reintroduce yourself and ultimately explain what you have built with Sepasoft? Give us a little bit of a background. Talk to us maybe how did you get started in manufacturing, and ultimately, we do want to get an update about Sepa IQ as well from you today.
Okay. Yeah, so starting from the beginning, I got manufacturing in the Midwest. Actually worked for an Allen Bradley distributor in the engineering department, which we had integrators that were competitors, so they got out of the engineering business. But that got me introduced into it, and I worked with a lot of manufacturers back there and got a lot of experience. Moved out to California, started an integration business, had that for several years, sold out my share of that. And actually Inductive Automation, I know the owner really well. He's my brother. And I thought, we meet at family events and whatever, and he's telling me what he's doing with ignition. And I thought, that's really cool. And so said, hey, do you need modules to install into Ignition, this modular platform that customers are asking for? And MES came up, and so started Sepasoft creating modules for the Ignition platform. And today we have the full suite of MES modules. Probably the most recent one, which is I think very significant, is a true ISA 88 batch module. With PLI and all that, right in the Ignition platform. So you have your HMI and your batch processing all in the same platform. I could ask you guys, have you heard of any batch systems being created in the last 15 years? I think I know the answer to that. I haven't heard of any, so let me know if you do. So it's pretty significant, I think, and we're getting a lot of traction in the regulated industries with that. Likewise, you mentioned Sepa IQ there. Many of our customers obviously want to get their data under control. They want to not only have very powerful performance and analytics down on the plant floor for operations, but they also want to push it up higher for BI, just advanced analytics, AI initiatives. So SEP IQ sits in that middle space, and we can talk about it more as we go, but it ties in with our modules that are on the Ignition platform.
And so obviously there's a lot of different features to explore, and ultimately I think the batch conversation could be an entire series of episodes, because I have dealt, I guess, with multiple projects on different platforms where it is very custom and very difficult to get any type of tangible data and then decisions based on batch processing or batch replaying. And I think it is a whole, I want to say, set of industries that benefit from those types of solutions. That being said, I do want to focus us a little bit on the AI side, right? Because, like I said, there's many topics and we could spend probably 5 hours on all of those fronts. I think
Yes.
that AI has certainly been in many conversations. I will preface this. We have two resources, right, that we do want to discuss or weave into the conversation today. One of them is the MIT study. And so the three of us have gone through the MIT study, but we will link the page where you can sign up and download the PDF ultimately. We are, I guess, at this stage, unable to just put the PDF somewhere so you can download, but we will be referencing a couple of numbers and findings when it comes to AI. And number two, so Tom, we've discussed this a little bit as well, and I've gone through the blog post that you have put together on the Sepasoft website, which I think not only starts a lot of interesting conversations, but ultimately is very important to consider in terms of like angles when you're looking at some of these solutions, right? And we'll get into this a little bit more, but we will have those resources for those who are listening in podcast form in the description as well. That being said, let me maybe take a step back, right? So I want to make the assumption that everyone that's listening to us is familiar with, the general set of LLMs when it comes to chatbots, right? I would assume everyone has been at least to ChatGPT or any other variation to at least prompt, whether that's to rewrite an email or create a post or whatever other type of application in a general sense. So I want to ask you maybe, Tom, to define a little bit better what does it mean to talk about manufacturing AI, right? Are we talking about pulling sensor level data? Are we talking about maybe transforming ERP level data? Are we talking about decisions for sales and manufacturing, marketing and manufacturing, operational information, right? So is there maybe a set of guardrails that you would put in the conversation specific to AI in manufacturing?
Yeah, and it really depends what a company wants to achieve with AI. I think the bottom line is efficiency, do more with less, have fewer quality problems, meet your target production dates and all those kinds of things. So depending on specifically what they're working on with AI they're gonna have to get that data for it. AI just doesn't know, it has to learn from data, and that data is vital. So if you don't give it all the data, you don't have access to it because your controllers and communications and all that, you don't want it to make the data up. You want it to actually use from the data. If you're doing production scheduling and stuff like that with it and optimizing your schedules, then ERP information is going to be really important. If it's quality information, you might have QMS or lifetime management type information that you want to bring into it. The obvious things are just manufacturing data. How can we learn from what has happened on the production floor and pick up on patterns and not make mistakes and detect things early, quality problems early, all those kinds of things. that data is going to come from the plant floor.
And so to maybe expand on that a little bit before I pass the proverbial mic to Dave, is I guess in a again broader sense, right? So when we're talking about collecting some of that data or understanding what's going on the production floor, can you paint us a picture of I guess what's possible today? What versus what was possible pre LLMs, right? So I would assume abnormalities could have been detected, using pattern recognition from, let's say, a voltage of a drive spikes up, you can detect that spike, and you can do regression analysis on the old style of, I want to say, AI or more like machine learning type of algorithms. What type of maybe insights are we able to see, collect, or maybe transform today that we couldn't before some of these LLM advancements?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand what an LLM is in this context. So, large language model. It deals with language. It deals with words, and behind the scenes, it's taking all those words, reducing it down to numbers, and doing predictions of the next word and analyzing the words. So when you talk about a sensor on the plant floor, LLM really doesn't know anything about that. So what you can do though is register tools or agents. We've heard of agentic term out there, and to get that data and process that data for us. So to get your actual plant floor production data or any data, I guess, within your company. So now you can interface with that and start looking for insights into that. And that's where the LLM can learn. So that's one aspect of LLM. The other aspect of it is once it has learned all this different language about your company now, so it could be service manuals, it could be compliance documents or any of that, you can then pull up that relevant information quickly compared to going through it manually with the LLM. So now you can combine that with your actual production data and you get some very interesting things happening. The other thing I think, I don't know, this isn't real significant, but I think it's really cool, is if I ask LLM, I just in a chat bot say, what is my OEE for the current production run? It actually can make a couple calls in. So, well, production run, what is the current production run? It can call into the tool, get the what is my current production run? Well, you're doing work order one, this product, whatever. And then it calls in and it gets the OEE for that production run. So it can make multiple back and forth requests before it displays the natural language result back to you. Now, aside from that, you have machine learning. And machine learning is more of picking up patterns in your data, your production data, I'm going to say, but whatever that data is. So just picking up those patterns. So you collect a whole bunch of history of data, you start going through and you usually use supervised training to train it against something. Simple analogy is this a spam email or not? And here's all the title and the body and all that kind of stuff going into it. And so you can do that same thing in manufacturing. Here's my quality attribute, my scrap, whatever. Here's all the factors associated with that production run, they call features, and you can train it and start looking for patterns. So there's LLM isn't magical. It's just not, it doesn't think, it doesn't have a conscience, it doesn't reason things out really well other than processing words.
Oh, thank you, Vlad. No, I think that's interesting. I guess, Tom, how do you go about choosing which tools you use based upon the business cases, right? And I think you made a really good point earlier is AI is very dependent, right? These solutions are very dependent upon what you want to do. And you can, in theory, do anything with them. When I talk to people, some of the biggest first steps is deciding where do we want to use it, right? You can use it in theory on the plant floor. You see lots of these tools being leveraged inside of your ERP inside of your business tools, inside of your accounts receivable, um, uh, and all of the accounting and the other things. So, what are the conversations you're having with end users that are looking to use AI in a broader instance? How do you go about kind of picking those use cases? And then how do you go about deciding which machine learning or AI or agentic AI tools that you use to go solve those particular business cases?
Yeah, so we're mainly concerned down on the plant floor manufacturing data. That's mainly where my exposure is. I've heard of customers talk about, supply chain, which is a whole nother world. Which transport company do you use? Where do you source it from? What vendor? Blah blah blah. Goes on and on and on. So I'm not really in that world, but as the manufacturing floor end of it, quality comes up a lot. Because if you can catch a problem early and see a pattern, and if you think about it, we have the SPC, statistical process control, and they have rules, and these rules have been around. The Westinghouse rules or Nelson rules, they've been around longer than all of us, and you have to know which rule to apply, and you apply one or more rules. And if it violates those rules, then it sends off a trigger and to go correct that. But taking AI and using it in there, you don't really care about rules. You're just trying to let AI recognize the patterns of data that you represent it to. So you might have scrap figure you train it against. You might have individual unit, it's good or bad. Here's all the data that happened during manufacturing that led up to that, and it ended up being bad. So it detects those patterns in there, and then it can give you a probability of this unit is bad. So if 5% probability, you're probably not going to take any action. You get 75, 80, 50 even. What should we do to that product to not continue adding value or expending that money on it to find out later on it's going to end up bad? So you can catch it early. So I think there's a huge opportunity for a return on investment in the quality area. And I see companies working on that and working with companies on that. Aside from that, just efficiency. When we run this product on this line with this crew, I mean, all the different combinations with this raw material vendor, all of this, well, we have a higher scrap rate, or we have more downtime, or anything like that, or predicting downtime and when failures are going to happen on equipment, and being ahead of that to prevent that in the first place. Scheduling is kind of a big thing. We don't have scheduling out. It's something we're working on that will come out in the fourth quarter. That will allow you to take AI and feed it back into it, or machine learning and feed it back into it. So if we always schedule this product on this line, we always run over. So it will avoid scheduling on the line. It might not prevent it, but it will avoid it. Or to minimize changeovers, or to, basically run through those scenarios. Or even if users manually move a schedule from what was automatically created, we learn from that, and then that feeds back in, and we either avoid running that product on the line because they don't like to, or we favor running it on the other line because they favor that. And then now the next schedule comes, and we'll follow suit on that. There's probably a lot of other applications of AI. I'm not listing all. There's more that come to my mind, but there's even more that people are going to come up with. And we're interested in just having that dialogue and seeing if we can help them in that area.
Absolutely. So you mentioned quality, Tom. Is that a kind of good first opportunity you think exists for AI within lots of different manufacturing environments? Is that kind of early in this kind of manufacturing AI conversation? Is that the direction you see lots of people interested? Can you kind of expand upon what you're seeing and what you're hearing with that, please?
Yeah, so quality, also optimizing settings.
Okay.
And these are just the areas. And then when certain aspects of a machine have to be changed out, like electrodes or something
Okay.
like that need to be changed out. So they start seeing a correlation of quality or something like that. So now it's, it tells the system, predicts, hey, after you ran this combination of products for this period of time or this many units, you should be proactive and change out the electrodes type of functionality. And really haven't got into the maintenance management aspect of it and being proactive on the maintenance management.
Let me ask you maybe a follow-up on that side, right? So I think, or at least in some of the conversations that I've had with end users, everyone's obviously excited to see what's next, but I think there's some foundational, I would say, set of requirements that need to be in place before you can say, hey, we're going to leverage AI in any tangible way. So at least again, like drawing on what I'm seeing, there's still a lot of manufacturers on legacy protocols, legacy systems, and they don't necessarily have the foundational data in place. So I guess, to follow up on Dave's question, what are some of the basics that you see them implement? And I guess, to draw back on, is it sometimes maybe user input that is more required, where, the operator would type in certain information, or do you see them requiring maybe proper data structures and proper historians for that matter before they can see any tangible ROI?
Yeah, that you hit a major point, and I think that's been a little bit of the hype in the industry. Hey, just collect your data. We'll figure out what to do with it later, and that's a challenge. Not all companies are collecting their data, right?
Mhm.
So you have your challenges, like you mentioned. What control systems do you have in place? What infrastructure do you have in place in that area? Can you communicate to it? Can you pull out the relevant information? Here's a big one. Original equipment manufacturers sometimes lock down their programs and they don't want people reading data from it, so that's a barrier to being able to apply AI. And I should note too, it's just not AI. How do you do analytics in general if you don't have that data, and that data is good data that you can trust?
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be very reliable and good. If you have a sensor that is measuring a temperature, whether you have product in the tank or not, and you're recording that value, you need to know whether you have product in that tank or not, to know what values to ignore, or what product is in the tank might be significant along with that, right? So when we say context, I hate that word because it means different things to different people and it's overused, but that's really giving the proper associations to your data so that you can further relate it and look for patterns. So getting that data is huge. So you have the connectivity to that data, and then you have the association and context with that data. And you hear a lot of technologies out there, UNS, MQTT, and Sparkplug, and all those, and there's others out there. And they really just record data off in a time series. And, giving that association of, who was the operator at that time? What were we running? And here's the EBR data, or electronic batch record, or here's the recipe that we were trying to run and the targets that we were running. I mean, the data goes on and on and on. All that needs to be associated to, I feel, to really do a proper looking for patterns in your data. And so where are you going to do that? You're either going to do it up at a high level, and a lot of times data scientists up there, they don't have the domain expertise, or you're going to do it at a lower level, which it's commonly done because you display that to the operators and you give that information to operations folks, or you do it in both places. So I'm kind of a proponent of do it once in one place because it's easier to roll out and maintain. and then, push that data on up. So that data, has to be accurate, and you have to be able to trust it. You have to have all of it. I can go a little bit into why that is really important, before you're going to be successful at it.
Let me, I guess, so we've mentioned a little bit that there was an interesting MIT white paper slash study that, I guess, the punchline of which is that only 5% of projects have actually had an impact on the P&L, right? And I guess my understanding, Tom, and just to, I guess, explain it for those that haven't read the study, is that is not applicable to the general use of, again, as we discussed, ChatGPT or chatbots. I think a lot of the companies have purchased, the license from Microsoft or OpenAI for the employees, but this has to do with specific AI applications that have been created as a result of, I guess, standalone. Here's an application that uses AI that does like ABC. It takes these inputs and processes these outputs for a specific workflow. Could you maybe expand a little bit what you thought of the white paper, and I guess what were some of the key findings on your side when it comes to it?
Yeah, I knew companies were trying to figure this out and are struggling with it, and it kind of confirmed that. So the MIT actually went out to many companies and not only surveyed management, but even the people that would be using the AI to find out what the issues were and the success rate and all that. And you're right, companies are spending a lot of money on AI, but 5% are seeing that return. So that tells you a lot that, it's not just a simple thing where you just, implement it and you're good. You don't feed it all the data and say, hey, tell me what I think I should know. It doesn't do that. So, and I think the other thing that was interesting about that's 5% of any type of business, not manufacturing. So I would guess that probably manufacturing is less than that. I've heard of small islands of success. I haven't heard of rolled out across the company success.
I think they even break it down by department, if I'm not mistaken, if that had made an impact on, IT, operations, sales, marketing, right? And I guess my understanding, again, is that the consensus, there's a lot of simple applications, right? Again, we talked about, hey, here's my email, make it nicer, or hey, here's my email, make it better for this specific colleague. But when it comes to operations or tangible, data on the plant floor, it is a little bit more complex than, those simple apps. So I think that's where we can maybe draw hypotheticals about manufacturing, but it would be difficult, obviously, to say what the success is.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if I can add to that, I think at the end of the day, it goes back to the points that Tom was making earlier, is that most groups don't collect all or enough of their data, and very little of that data has been contextualized or normalized in a way that we can go feed it into a non-process expert system to be able to go ahead and draw conclusions. And I would imagine it's a months or years long process for lots of these groups to get to the point of potentially to being able to use that data. I would think or hope that some of the larger companies and organizations, the Fortune 500 plus, are going through that process in some smaller instances to do some of that normalization and contextualization. But again, if it was something that we could snap our fingers and go do, we would have done it 10 years ago with machine learning. And I know people 10 years ago who were going down that process, but like very specific processes that were very much the core of their business, where if they can get an extra 1% throughput, that is worth millions of dollars to them, not across the board. It's just a very expensive, human time consuming process in order to go do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually went out the other day with some friends and they were asking me about AI and stuff. And I kind of came up with an analogy that I think helps explain AI. So we start out as a kid and we're taught the letter A, and it's usually a printed A. Here's the shape, that's an A. We go through all the letters and stuff. And then we're exposed, we see the alphabet listed in another font or whatever else, and we see different shapes for the letter A. And we learn it. So now, when you see a font you've never seen before, and you go, that's an A. You just know it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did we go through to learn that? And AI has to go through that same thing. So when you train it, you have to train it on, here's all the different fonts of the letter A, and then it can do what's called the inference, which is, okay, here's a image of an A in a different font, and it does the pattern, and the best answer it comes up with, well, this is an A. It doesn't seem to fit a B. So it goes, okay, that's the letter A. If you don't train it with enough data, or you're missing data in your training, it's not going to be able to do that. So if you just taught it A and you don't show it the rest of the letters, for example, call any letter an A, because that's going to be the best fit. So it really goes back to where you're talking, Vlad, about the data. You need enough data, and it has to be accurate because it's learning from it, and to come out and get that. So I think companies are still in that state, Dave, of how do you get the data in and have the data so we can trust it. But you're absolutely right. I've heard of some very specific, like maybe 3 attributes they're looking at, and then they can predict quality or something in a machine learning. Yeah.
Let me ask maybe I really like that analogy, right? But I guess I do want to ask within the context of AI, maybe to have a sanity check on my side, but also to hopefully expand on this for some of the listeners, right? So when we talk about let's say, manufacturer deployed AI, right? There's a couple of concepts, right? So the training, as I understand it, happens, let's say, for an LLM on the entire, let's say, global data set, right? So the OpenAI data set has already been trained to answer something when I give it context, right? So there's the training data, and then there's the context window, which is expanding with every release, but obviously with different results, and we can expand on that a little bit. But so for a manufacturer, when you say train the data, it is on the data that they are providing, or is it the data that the LLM inherently has? And then also, could you expand a little bit on the context window? Because I think there's also been, or at least I've been reading some resources and having conversations where individuals are not necessarily clear what that means, because they also confuse that with the MCP concept, right? And there's a lot of, I think, I say, like, different definitions, which actually your article explains quite well. But could you expand a little bit more on this data, and where does the data actually get stored once they get it from the manufacturing and floor, and how does it get processed?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think it's something I just kind of learned, and I don't think that other people may not know it now. So glad you brought it up. So you have the basic model, and that's like you hear about ChatGPT Mini or whatever 4.0 model, and I think they came out with the latest one. And that model is trained on pretty vast amount of data. There's some models out there that are more industry specific, and those are probably targeted for certain industries very well. But the data it's trained on doesn't include your factory, or your business in any way. For example, if you ask it, what's your OE of line 1, it might come back and tell you, this is how you calculate OEE, because that's all it knows. It doesn't know the production data of your line 1. So that's the basic model that is there, and that allows it to understand language and different questions that you may ask it in different structures of words. How I ask it is going to be different than how Vlad asks it or Dave asks it. And so, but what it can do is recognize questions, and you can register tools with that. LLM. So you can get a private chat GTP account, and you're given an API key, and then you can go to chat GTP with a chat question. But when you register tools to that, to now get data. Now that data could be in a database, that data could be in some other form, okay?
Mhm.
And that's part of what Sepa IQ does. It allows you to register these tools and configure these tools to be very specific for your business, okay? It's not even by industry or whatever. You make it detailed to your business. So the LLM recognizes the question. Oh, you said OEE? There's a tool registered that calculates OEE. Okay, calculate the OEE, and here's the parameters around that. They ask for line 1, maybe they ask for the last month, what have you. That gets passed in to Sepa IQ. Sepa IQ does the analysis for that to get the exact answer from your real-time production data, and then gives the answer back to the LLM. The LLM then puts it into words and presents that back to the user. So that's one form that you can use it. Now, you can take that basic model and then start ingesting your company documents or other data into that, okay? Even database data into that. So now you're extending that initial training that it had, which is pretty vast. You're extending it with stuff that is pertinent to your company or specific to your company. So now when you interact to it, it has that information as well. Now, when you do that though, that's history. That's not real time. That's, you know, if you fed it a document about your OE last month and you ask it a question, you know, it's not going to tell you about your OE today, this hour, this second. Hopefully that helps kind of clarify that.
Interesting. So I guess, well, I have a number of questions. Let me ask you one more on that side before I pass it to Dave. So I'm curious. So again, it seems that everyone is either building or I guess renting GPUs for the purposes of LLMs. Could you expand, I guess, for a manufacturer that's looking to maybe test this out? What does the cost actually look like, right? Because ultimately it depends, right, is the consulting answer, but you
Yeah.
can feed it, you know, a single question just like you can feed it, you know, a stack of different documents. And then I would assume that the computational power could get pretty expensive, right? And I personally, I use Cloud Code quite extensively, and
Yeah.
I went through the limits within like the first 2 hours. Then the second day I got frustrated, so I had to upgrade, you know, to the more expensive business plan. But ultimately, I guess, how do you see the costs trending? Again, and obviously I wouldn't expect you to give us the exact like numbers, but what's like a simple application, or maybe more complex, or, you know, too much context, or like a general thought on I guess the tokenization of LLMs and these types of tools?
Yeah. It's pretty significant factor. It can be very low in cost, you know, depending on the model that you're using, depending on the amount of additional training to that initial model you're doing. The training, from what I understand, is the heavy resource load as far as LM. The inference, where you're asking the questions of it and looking up the data, is less. So that if you, in that first scenario where I described the LLM, it understands questions, it goes to the tool to get the answer. That's pretty light load. You know, you don't need a real advanced model. It just needs to understand the language that you're dealing in, English or what have you, and know when to call the tool. And you don't need much models to do that. If you're training it and you're going to go more advanced on that, typically what I'm seeing companies do is they're using services like Azure or AWS, those types of services to do that. And you pay. It's not cheap. So that in turn affects your return on investment, right? Because
Yep.
you're investing a lot, but you're not getting your return yet. And you might be doing a whole bunch of experimenting with it before you do get to getting some meaningful return. Don't have a specific answer, but in general. Now, there are new models coming out. In fact, I think Anthropic, you mentioned Claude,
Yep.
just came out with a model, which is in fact, the term SLM came up too, small language models, but it's more specific to a particular industry or topic, instead of ChatGPT, which knows medical and engineering and programming and everything, you might have one that's specific to medical, okay, or any one of those sectors. But the one that Claude just announced is you can run it on a regular computer. It's a lot less in the way of resource demand. So I think that's going to probably, for like in the manufacturing space anyways, is going to be a good option going forward. And that will help reduce the cost.
That's super interesting. I will have to do a little bit of research on that side. I guess I missed the announcement of that release, but yes, it's an interesting space, right? Because a lot of, I think, VC capital in a general broader sense is going into some of these companies. So it is hard to say if that's the real cost or if that's heavily subsidized by some of that investment, right? So I'm not sure where we will settle, to your point, on the ROI, which needs to be very heavily considered, let's say in 2 years, 3 years, and down the line, right? It's very interesting. But
and then in addition to that, a company here that I talked to recently, and they're interested in our product because it helps solve some of these things. But they have a single site. They're not rolling out across multiple sites, but they started getting into AI. And actually, a lot of what he described was like, this is really just analysis. It's not AI, but they were applying AI in places as well. But they had a lot of different technologies, a lot of just different separate proof of concepts, and it was very dispersed. And the results, they were seeing some benefits, but not enough to pay for their investment. But long term, you think about that. How do you maintain a system like that? You're using many different products and technologies and whatever else. You have to kind of consolidate, get your data into a common format, use common tools, and not be so dispersed. Especially if you're going to have multiple sites. To be able to maintain this and roll this out, you have to start looking at how do we do this with CI/CD, and so that we can roll it out quickly and be able to maintain it and roll out additional changes as we make improvements. So
that's a whole other challenge. I think that could be a very, very long conversation. I know some groups that are struggling on that side, but we'll leave it at that for now.
Okay.
Dave, what are your thoughts?
I was going to say, if I can just go jump into the economics of some of these solutions, I agree. I think it's very interesting. Vlad and I have had several long conversations around use of Quad Code and ChatGPT and some of these other tools, and different ways that we can go about doing it. And it's very interesting, specifically as Vlad has been sharing to me some of his path down using Quad Code, right? And how he's using it. And then once you get past like dipping your toes in the water with some of these tools, it suddenly opens up all of these opportunities. And then you see like these crazy edge cases that Vlad has shared where people have like 4 different accounts and they're running 4 different, threads of things on 4 different projects at the same time, and absolutely maxing out the limits. And then on the other side, you see people who have realized that, one token will do like 25 different subtasks. And so the question becomes, how do I go optimize each of these subtasks so I spend fewer and fewer tokens? It's very interesting. I imagine we'll see some sort of leveling out, right? Like I imagine at some point we won't see anyone but like the best, most highly paid engineers attempting to run 4 different simultaneous sets of tasks on a tool. similar to, I imagine at some point, we will see that people aren't allowed to go have 25 different subtasks for every single token because that's maybe too much optimization. So I think at some point we'll see that. But also on the other side, you see all of these additional benefits, but you also see all of the power and need for physical footprints of space to go put these CPUs and GPUs in order to go run this. And so I think to some extent, it will be interesting because we'll have to level out at some point. Yes, we'll have to level out at some point, and it will be interesting to see where we level out. Tom, you brought up a couple of really good points that I do want to go ask about. First being Sepa IQ. I know you talked a little bit about it again for our listeners who may be joining us now. We were with Tom, episode 179 of Manufacturing Hub, where we talked about kind of the very early beginnings, right? We're like, I don't know, about 11 months from that point. How has that been going? How have customers reacted? How has the product maybe changed or modified from what we were talking about last year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in this 11 months time, we've been working closely with some customers, and every step of the way through the process, because we want to know, we want to learn from it, and then also we've added a lot of features to handle things that have come up. And some of those things are how do you push the data up into like Azure in one case? Do we just pass the changes up, or do we recalculate all the results and send the whole data set up? Well, it's better to just send the changes up. Just reduces the cost in bandwidth and all that kind of storage and all those kind of things. So stuff like that, to being able to handle a date that is in a totally non-standard, whoever put the data in that format should be fired kind of situation. But that's the real world. You have different systems, legacy systems, whatever else, and you've got to be able to deal with that. You have all this data in these different places, and you got to bring it together. And that's what we are doing for them, bringing it together into Sepa IQ, into a standardized format, because every plant is even different, and then passing that up in the standard format. So we've been doing a lot of that, and just really refining, beefing up adding more connectors, adding OpenID, all that kind of functionality. Now we're working on, we've had quite a few requests for scheduling, and some of our learnings on this are on the predictions and stuff like that, or scheduling optimizations. Some of the learnings is you have to make that the decision making that the system's doing transparent.
Yep.
So our scheduling uses a scoring based system, algorithmic, and okay, here's those scores for the different scoring calculators you have. Display that to the user so that they trust the system. So that brings up that whole question of trust. And you have to have trust in your source data, but that's going to reflect in more accurate results out of the system. And you have to have trust in what the system is putting out as well. So those were some key learnings we've kind of learned by working with these customers. So it's really making our product robust. And we're also probably at ICC, we'll have some announcements on this of the different packages that will be available. Yeah.
Let me ask, I guess, just for maybe those who are unfamiliar with scheduling and the problems and I guess the solutions or the things you can solve on that side, to expand a little bit, right? And I have some guesses, I guess, as to how you can optimize scheduling, but what exactly is it, I guess, that the problem maybe the customers are experiencing, and then what can you like help with?
Yeah, scheduling automatically, you go into some places and they say can't be done. And there's usually a person that's responsible for scheduling.
Yep.
And it's so complicated because you've got all these different use cases for these companies. So transfer time, if I start producing pasta, how long is it before I need to start packaging? What's my min and max around that? Does it start from the beginning of starting pasta, which in that case it does, it overlaps. Others, you're running a whole batch process, maybe paint, and then you're going to put it in a buffer tank and then put it in a packaging. So you have all like transfer time, you have changeover. Changeover so complex. We've had requests for years to be able to have a matrix. Well, if you take every variable and you expand that out, the combinations are just huge. It becomes unmanageable. How are you going to be able to just maintain that and tell us what changeover? So breaking that up into two-dimensional arrays, really. If we're going from tool A to B, this is the change. If we're going from allergen to non-allergen, this is it. Now you can sum those together and have multiple ones that all define your changeover. And then over the years, we learned we're not going to cover everything. So having a custom script function in there to have an additional scoring, to have additional calculation on your changeover, transfer times, all that kind of thing is significant. And then in addition to just, what are the priority or due date? You just have all kinds of factors that all come into this and make it very complicated. So we've actually have a working copy, that's early here. We haven't released it to anybody yet. That the performance is incredible and it supports all those things.
I'm starting to feel stressed just from hearing all the variables that must be, obviously.
Oh, I was having
into the
flashbacks.
system.
I'm having
Yes.
flashbacks, especially when Tom's like, there's typically one person who does all the scheduling. And I'm like, yes, I am generally in many sites very familiar with that one person, of which they always tinker with the schedule. The facility couldn't run without them. They're the only one who knows how those things work. And half the times, or 90% of the time, they're either high and or low on changeovers, right? So changeovers and what happens if we're putting items in buffer tanks or intermediary tanks, those are really good questions that you are asking and bringing up, Tom. And in my experience, almost no one has a real reason as to why we allot or don't allot the amount of time in between that we do for especially things like changeovers for small to medium-sized facilities. Some big facilities have good ideas of what like a golden run or a golden changeover would look like, but the vast majority of them are like, we always block 3 hours in between. It may take 15 minutes. It may take 5 hours. We don't have a good reason why, but we always block, the same amount of time in between all of these changeovers. And we also want to know why we run so bad when we do multiple changeovers every day.
Yeah. We're excited about that one.
Tom, let me ask you maybe to expand. So maybe besides the having all the data in a, I want to say, clean environment challenge, right? There's two things, I guess, that I hear people talk or ask about is number one, and we talked a little bit about this off stream, right? It's hallucinations. And obviously that's within the context of LLMs more so than machine learning or more traditional AI. And number two is, cybersecurity, or maybe where does that data actually live, right? And I know that you've talked a little bit about the architecture where they can feed the data into the model. And I think there's different grades of models where it's public or private, but I think a lot of companies don't necessarily understand how do you feed the data in a way that doesn't expose your facility to the risk. So maybe could you expand a little bit on both of those challenges, as I'm sure you've had many conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So LLMs, when you ask it a question, it will always, always, always give you an answer. And there's times it shouldn't. And the other thing that's not included, because it doesn't know, and the other thing is that it doesn't tell you, hey, I'm only 10% positive about this answer, or I'm 90%. It doesn't tell you that. It's kind of like if you go up to a person, you ask them about some topic, and some people will say, I don't know. You need to go talk to this other person. And other people, you ask them, you'll get an answer. You may be right or may not be right. So the same thing is true here. And so it will make stuff up and it's not correct. So in manufacturing, that's just not going to cut it. It needs to be correct. You have some safety concerns, possibly. You have maybe you order the wrong quantities of raw materials and now you're stuck with them. So now you have a financial impact. It's just not good. So one is training, having all the data that's available there accurate and training it completely helps that, but doesn't necessarily eliminate it. And I'm hoping the industry, the technology as we go forward just improves and this becomes less and less of a problem. The other thing though is in the meantime, you need to validate everything that is asking. If it's placing an order for raw material, you need a person in that loop. And then what was the other question there?
The data, like exposing your data and information to the outside world.
Yeah. So you're not going to just add your data to the public ChatGPT. They won't allow that. They may try to come to your websites or your other sources of data and grab it and ingest and learn from it. But your production data and stuff like that, you can't register a tool to that. So what you do is you sign up for a private account. OpenAI, you can do that. Azure, no problem, you can do that. AWS, and then you use that private account, and that makes it private to just your company. You can also install locally on your own servers and stuff, but like we were talking about earlier, that can be a resource load on your system and probably not the best solution. And then you register the tools, which then go to your systems to calculate the answers, database or Sepa IQ or what have you. I think an important thing, is just that, when it comes to security, you have multiple people, and that becomes more of a challenge. So if I ask it, what were the sales this month? Well, if that's not information that all people should have, how do you start controlling that security? And that becomes a little bit more challenging. Can be done, but you have to plan for that in advance.
The private accounts that you mentioned, I thought it's still learned based on those queries, or it doesn't. There's a way to get it to not retain any data that you submit into it.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, on the public one, you're right. That is, it doesn't matter if you're using it for home, business, whatever. By default, you go in there and you start asking questions, or you paste your information into it. It can use that to learn, and that doesn't fly. A business policy, probably they have something in there if they've addressed LLMs and chat. To not be able to do that. Now you can go in there and you're right. There's a setting in there that you say, don't learn from this information. So if you don't have that a private account and you're using the public ones, that's definitely a concern.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma, right? Because it's one thing, obviously, if I share information about the data from, let's say, a palletizing machine, I don't think anyone can leverage that for a whole lot. But if you ask it questions on the financial side, like you mentioned, or pull something from the ERP, that could certainly, again, I don't know if it could tangibly be really easily accessed by a competitor, but it could definitely be a question for some of the departments within the organization. That's why I think a lot of manufacturers and companies are still not 100% clear where that line truly is, at least in my conversations.
Yeah, I think the answer is for the companies, they need to set up a company account. Absolutely. And manage that with the users, because otherwise users are just going to do it and they're not going to have the setting right, or they're going to go on their personal device or something, and it slips out, right? And so that's kind of a security policy security settings type issue that companies need to address. We're having to do that ourselves here. We're becoming ISO 27001 certified. And even without that, we have a lot of policies anyways, but it takes it over the edge really, as far as security on items like that.
Absolutely. And I would imagine for most organizations that have people leveraging ChatGPT, other tools like that, they're going to realize the value in protecting their information with those enterprise accounts. I don't know. I don't think there's public pricing as to what enterprise accounts cost. I do know team accounts are basically the same cost as a personal individual account at like $25 a month or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So I cannot imagine the enterprise is going to be significantly more than that, especially when you factor in the risk of potential information going out and feeding into these models, especially information that you don't want. So if you're going to have your teams use these or have your teams use the APIs based off of these, you're going to want to make sure that your information is as locked down as possible. At which point, the only question is, how much do we trust OpenAI and their terms of service? And if we trust OpenAI and their terms of service, then we're going to go down that route. If we decide our information is too valuable to not trust it, we're going to go spend millions of dollars to train our own LLMs and just have those be the only things used internally. But most of us don't have millions of dollars to go question if that's the best use of funds to go build our own LLMs.
Yeah, no, that that's a really good point, because that's wholly separate from a system using AI, machine learning, and all that kind of stuff. That's tied in with your plant systems or company systems, and the user can just go out and just hey, review this email. Well, maybe that email has some sensitive information in it. So that's yeah, it's going to be interesting, I guess, just kind of see how that all plays out over time too.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, with ICC just around the corner, Tom, if someone's maybe interested in a tangible technical demo of Sepa IQ, can they find that there? Can they go online somewhere and see? I guess I don't know what the licensing of the module even looks like. I guess curious as well on that side. If you want to trial, if you want to maybe tie in some test data or see like a demo in action, what would that look like?
Yeah, so as far as ICC, we have a couple presentations we're doing there. There's the Prove It session, which is all about UNS and the virtual factory and tying in with that and everything. So we have a presentation there that's very focused around, integrating in with UNS and that. And then we have another session, which is kind of just more going over our key products and stuff. Flat out, not enough time to really do any of it justice. So we also have a booth there, but contact us. We have plenty of people there, and we can either do it at the show or we can follow up and go into whatever level of detail that we want to go through, or the potential customer wants to go through. Because we just can't cover everything. We struggle with how to do a presentation and what are the key things we're going to show. It's not everything our products are capable of. As far as Sepa IQ, we do have, I mentioned earlier, we're going to have different packages there. So we've had the high-end, the premium version available. Now we're going to have two other packages available, basic and I forget what we call it, but an in-between one. And then we also have a kind of a proof of concept program, which is a monthly charge. So not only do you get the use of the product, you get us too. And we're part of that team, just kind of working through it and going over best practices and just what problems are you looking to solve. We'll identify 3 or 4 key initiatives you want to do. And then we'll focus on those and kind of prevent the scope from going crazy. And you can try it out that way, and then you're committed to it. That will all be credited to you purchasing the product.
Interesting. I like that.
Very cool. I like that business model. And so if you guys are going to be at ICC, as we mentioned earlier, uh, Tom, do you remember the Sepasoft booth? I don't remember the Sepasoft booth. If you don't remember, I promise we'll go put it in the show notes for all of our listeners.
I don't remember. I wasn't involved in it, so I don't know.
Oh, good. Now, that is the good answer. That's why Tom's got founder as part of his title. But no, we'll go ahead and drop the booth. I don't think you guys can possibly walk through ICC and not see Sepasoft or any of the kind of 24 or so booths overall. So please go ahead and check them out. Tom, this has been fantastic. We do want to go ask you the last questions we ask all of our guests. And the first one, as Vlad may or may not have told you, is one of my favorite. We want to go ask you to predict the future. So what better way to set you up for only failure is to ask you what you think the future of AI in manufacturing looks like in the next 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
Like 17 lifetimes in this whole AI ecosystem.
I wish I could predict the future, guys. I really do. I can tell you it's going to be exciting. We didn't really talk about, just touched on it as far as like development and using AI for development. And I think that's where most of the advancements have been made. And it is an incredible time saver if used properly. It could be 1/10 of the time to code something. Okay. And I can't imagine what that's going to be like in a year or two. I only see it getting better. So things are going to come faster, I believe. I think we're still going to struggle with AGI. So artificial general intelligence. And that's where it's like a person. It can think, it can reason like a person. To be honest, like LLMs are actually kind of dumb in a way. They just do it real fast and they look impressive. So they can bring it relevant data to you very fast. To get into general intelligence where it's like a person, I think the industry really isn't in agreement of how that's going to be achieved. And so I think that's going to take a little while longer. How long? I don't know, 5, 10, maybe, if that. So I do see that. Now I do see we're still high in the hype curve. Mm-hmm. We might just be starting to drop into, what do they call it, disillusionment, where people realize the hype isn't all real. And it's going to settle down into what is real and practical. Meaning, okay, here's our investment, here's our return. Okay, what do we invest for it? What companies out there are in this marketplace and it's succeeding? What, all that gets sorted out, and we're going to be benefiting from AI in manufacturing and other industries for that fact. You hear all kinds of crazy stuff. People saying lights out factory. Well, I've heard that 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's very rare if at all. So people saying robots coming in and doing it. I just don't see that. Obviously, robots have made a difference and there is going to be traction on robots. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is some industries, it's so expensive. Even if the cost of robots come down or the task is so challenging, they're just going to throw people at it, So putting heads of lettuce in a box, maybe, whatever. It's just, we're not going to just see robots take over overnight. It's probably not even my lifetime where that would occur.
Yeah, I really like the way you put it. I think we both agree on many of those points. I think my quandary also with, individuals sometimes that have seen maybe only very unautomated facilities and see all these opportunities to, let's say, increase OE by 20%. They believe that the 20% when you're running at, 30% is the same cost as adding a 20% to when you're running at 70%, right? And it's completely different scale, and you're looking at diminishing returns, and you're fighting for that. Like 1% is worth millions and millions of dollars when you're, at 80 plus OE. So I think it's spot on what you're saying. It's obviously everyone wants to run lights off, but it becomes extremely expensive as you're getting closer and closer to that percentage. It just doesn't make sense. But that's that is also a whole conversation, I think, that we could be having. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
appreciate that.
Tom, let me ask for, we like to ask for some career advice. So perhaps from your perspective, if someone is looking to help ride this AI wave for the next 10, 20 years, based upon kind of your experience, what is the best career advice you would go give someone?
Well, I think without a question, you need to understand, learn AI, keep up with it. It's not learn it and done. You don't go to college, learn it, and now you've got the capabilities. You got to keep going because it's changing so fast. But it's going to happen to some degree, and this applies to companies too. Get started early. It's going to make a difference in your life, and if you don't gear up for it, it's just you're going to be left behind, I think. And I think that's the key thing. Advice in this industry, AI is not going to take over going out and mechanically fixing a machine. Not for quite a while, right? So even Space Odyssey 2001 movie, I don't think it happened there where it fixed the guy was still in there trying to do it. So I think that type of stuff, so controls engineers, all that kind of stuff, it's going to be around. We're going to use AI. It's going to be easier to program probably and configure systems, maybe diagnose systems, whatever else. You still have to have a basic or the core understanding of the technologies. You don't know what a byte is, that's probably going to be a problem if you're doing PLCs. So that kind of thing, you're going to still have to know that. It doesn't replace it. So I think there's huge opportunities. The industry can definitely use people getting into it.
Absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic advice all the way around. We'd like to ask for a book or content recommendation. We've got the Sepasoft blog post. We've got that MIT study. We're going to go ahead and link those. I wanted to know if you had anything else for us today.
Yeah. So I don't know. I read so much. I'm including fiction and stuff. But one book that kind of stood out it's called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And with all this stuff happening and it's so rapidly changing and all that, sometimes you can get kind of distracted and everything. So it's really about kind of focusing your efforts and such. So I think that would be the book I'd recommend.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tom. We'll go ahead and make sure to link that for anyone who wants to check that out as well. And lastly, Tom, how can our listeners help? Who should reach out? Besides coming to find you guys on ICC and checking out the Sepa IQ and the blog posts, who are you guys looking to connect with? Are you looking to hire kind of your open opportunity to ask our listeners anything?
Yeah. So, this is evolving technology, and we have people all over the board as far as concerns about adopting AI. Some are very optimistic. It's just across the board. So in the link that's there, the AI and manufacturing guide, at the bottom, we actually are interested in what your experience or concerns or successes you've had, what you think the industry needs that it doesn't have, or any of that. We're very open to that. And even if we get on a meeting online or what have you, or catch up with us at ICC, we love talking to companies and hearing what they're doing and learn more.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Tom, thank you so much. I look forward to the next conversation that we get to have about AI, I feel like, I don't know, it's a coin flip, right? We might be talking about the same things. We might be so far past those same things that we're talking about completely different things. But I think it's interesting as we get to go track these conversations, right? A year ago at Sepa IQ, I don't know, maybe some people were questioning as to if this AI thing or the LLMs were going to be useful in manufacturing. And now we're here, and we'll see if we're still riding the hype curve or we're into disillusionment the next time we get to go have one of these conversations. So thank you so much for coming to spend the time with us again this afternoon, and everyone, thank you for tuning in. We had a number of comments, no real specific questions. Maybe they're waiting to go ask you questions on the side, Tom, because they don't want kind of those individual things coming out and being known as to what they're doing. If you guys have made it this far, make sure that you're following Tom and Sepasoft and Vlad and myself in Manufacturing Hub. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast format, you guys are great. Thank you so much. Please do the like, subscribe, follow along thing. Check out the recorded podcasts that are coming out every week. And until next time, we'll see everyone soon.